Joining our discussion now is Mike Leon, host of the Can We Please Talk podcast, and CNN political analyst Laura Barron-Lopez. I'm so glad that both of you are here. Listen, you heard the secretary, and I have been really focused on this. It's not as if it's all perspective. I mean, he is a former president. He's currently running. He's a front runner. His base hears him. They like it. So who's got the disconnect? Is it the way it's covered or what he's actually saying?
Well, I'll tell you, I spoke with Florida primary voters this past weekend, and a lot of it is they think the media's coverage of it. It's kind of to Nikki Haley's point, right? They think the media is making too much of it. I tend to take a step back and say, these are his words. This is what he's actually saying. This is not a clipped up soundbite. He is saying these things. And the biggest thing I heard from that interview is, and we know how Mark Esper has felt about him. He has said that Trump is dangerous. Some of the things he wants to do with missile strikes that he asked him about during the border when he was in office. You're seeing more officials that worked under the administration saying this about him. This is not us three saying it about it. These are people that worked for him. Why isn't that impacting people? I don't get why it's not impacting voters. It should be. If people worked for somebody else and all of a sudden they didn't like this person and they told me all these things, wouldn't I take that to heart a little bit more?
Well, I think it's going to impact the general electorate, but the Republican base and the primary electorate for the GOP presidential is very different. And I think that the reason it's not resonating or impacting with them is because you haven't seen some massive rift in the GOP party. You haven't seen a massive piece of the establishment say, no, we're never going to vote for this person again. You've seen the Liz Cheneys, the Adam Kinzingers of the world, the Mitt Romneys who say loud and clear that he thinks that there are a majority of people in his party who don't subscribe to the Constitution anymore, who maybe want to go along with authoritarianism. And so when the base doesn't see a wide reckoning across the party or across the vast majority of Republicans, then of course they're going to believe the people that are constantly saying this to them and repeating the lies to them.
You know, I tend to think that when we talk about identity politics, Trump has given a lot of people an identity. The identity of being defiant, as in, I'm just against. I'm against something. I'm in favor of a lot, but I'm against certain things, and I'm unapologetic about it. Maybe this is a continued badge of honor to say, yeah, I hear him. You're telling me that I'm silly and not understanding him, but I'm telling you I hear him and I like it. So you're actually maybe feeling, if you're one of his supporters, that everyone's against you, and he is validating that.
And he's running on that. Look, I grew up in New York. There's a reason why the former president lost New York by so much, not just because of how many more registered Democrats there are than Republicans. It's because people that worked in businesses there with the former president, they've heard this for years. He's getting exactly what he wants. If you look at anybody who's covered Trump during the New York Post days back in New York, this is what he wants, to be the attention seeker and getter. He's getting it. We're covering him because he's the former president and the current front runner for the party. We have to cover him. He's under indictment, 4 different locales. We have to cover that. But we're always going to be in this push and pull battle because the goalposts keep moving. The voters that are entrenched with him will always say, well, it's the media doing this, it's the media doing that. The media is this big boogeyman to voters that I talk to, and I try to dispel it a little bit more by saying, look, which would you rather cover? The old woman across the street or, the former president that's being arrested? This is unprecedented type stuff. I just don't understand why it's not moving the needle. You asked this earlier, Laura. Why isn't it moving the needle with voters, specifically chiefs of staffs, people that have worked under the administration that are all coming out? This has all been revealed to him. Mike Pompeo, Esper, they've all said it. This guy is a danger. And for some reason, I don't understand why it's not resonating. I truly do not understand. And it's going to be interesting to see how this kind of plays out as we get into the caucus.
Well, it seems like it is resonating, but in the direction of doubling down. And, we'll talk more about, if you think about how this all looks and why, Laura, to Mike's point, Trump is a very effective communicator at ensuring that everyone that's not him is viewed with skepticism, as somebody who can view with derision, who is less than. And so all people you just named, if he has created a hierarchy where what he says is more important, then it stands to reason one would look at those comments with greater belief than the others.
Yeah, they believe him over the former chiefs of staff, over former administration officials, over the press. And that isn't just because there's this ambiguous, we don't trust the press. There's a reason that that there's low trust in the press among the Republican base because their leader, because the leader of the Republican Party has for years now, since he first started running for the presidency back in 2015, has demonized the press as the enemy of the people. He repeatedly talks about anyone that holds him accountable or any political opponent as less than, as he dehumanizes political opponents. More recently has started calling them vermin, dehumanizes people that don't support him. And that's a classic authoritarian playbook, Laura, which historians have laid out over and over again, that authoritarians do that because that way they can prepare their supporters for their eventual expanse of power and their decision to try to totally overhaul what we know as a democracy.
But, you know, there's also, I mean, just in terms of what's happening, not just with Trump, but there are others who are taking action at the state and local level. I mean, the governor in Texas, Greg Abbott, as we know, tonight has signed a new bill into law. And it's one that makes crossing illegally into Texas from Mexico now a state crime, which empowers local police to then arrest migrants. This is a really important point when you think about it, because the rhetoric that Donald Trump is speaking now has a hook in terms of a state prosecutorial crime. That tells you more than just a base supporting. So now this is at a state level, and it's being validated. What do you think of it?
Well, I mean, I was talking about this earlier with somebody else, because the Republican message around it is Democrats are not doing anything about it. Here's a governor in a red state doing something about it. DeSantis, same thing in my state, in Florida, doing something about it. Now, we can all get into whether or not sending, migrants on different flights and whether or not they're going to have their asylum trials in those areas. That's one thing. This is all coming kind of home to roost for the Democrats. I was talking to Representative Seth Moulton about this, about Democrats' messaging around this. The true message is a pathway to citizenship. It's keeping DACAs, here in the U.S., right, and legalizing that. But it's also understanding that there is an issue at the border. Let's not pretend like that there isn't. CBP has said in recent articles that they are overwhelmed. So if Democrats start to message around that we want to help law enforcement agencies and get everybody on the right pathway to being a citizen, it's going to potentially siphon off what some of these more moderate Republicans that want to hear that, because they want to hear that Democrats are treating the border like a serious issue. And this is one member of Congress that was saying such things and asking people that are Republican voters, when they listened to that, they were like, yep, I agree with that. So there's informal polling for you, Laura.
I mean, I love a good informal poll, but when you think about how this administration began, remember the conversations around the failure of Vice President Harris to call it a border crisis? That's how this all began. And so I do wonder, is the admission of there being a problem viewed somehow by Democrats as a kind of weakness and an admission of failure? I don't know if that's the case, but the voters are asking something to be done. The question is, what now? That's why they're the ones in office. Mike, Laura, thank you both so much for joining.